Another episode of the Workplace Wanderer starting now. Thank you to everybody who's going to be joining us on this live. Usually it takes a few minutes for people to start joining us, but the audio for this will also live on everywhere that you find your podcasts. And then later on, the video and audio of this is going to be living on YouTube. So if you're missing this today, don't worry if you catch it later on, but you want to put it on in the background at some point or put it on while you're driving, you will be able to do that. And today I'm excited to talk to this guest that I have today, who I met, I believe, in 2018 in person in Chicago at a Shatterproof event, right? It was 2018.
Yeah, I don't even know the date, but that's awesome. That makes sense. And I got sober in 2018. So that's really cool. I was really a newbie, an early person in early sobriety. And yeah, we did this run to raise money for addiction for the Shatterproof organization, which is a great organization that I've gotten lots of opportunities from, actually. I also volunteered for them at a Lumineers concert, and I ended up getting to be front row at the Lumineers. So that was
God,
as well as
so cool.
spread the good word about remove the stigma of addiction and recovery. But yeah, you were like the MC and you spoke, and I don't know how I knew you, but I did. So I ran up to you to introduce myself, and then I'm pretty sure you passed me at the finish line. It was very much a fun run for my friend and I, but that's so cool that we met years ago.
That is so cool. So let me just say, so my guest today is Heather Lowe with Ditch to the Drink. And so after we met, I believe we followed each other on social media at that point, and I've watched your progression and the impact that you're making in I would just call it the sans alcohol space of you kind of pushing a better lifestyle that doesn't involve alcohol, and a lot of it stems from your personal experiences and relationship with alcohol that eventually led you to a different lifestyle where you started to explore this world without alcohol and embracing the beauty of everything that we have around us. And to me, it's just been such a cool opportunity to watch you grow in the space and then watch what you've contributed to the space. So usually what I like doing, instead of giving a written biography of who you are, I always like the person to introduce themselves. And I'm starting to do something new, and you're going to be the first test dummy for it. So I hope this isn't too much for you. I don't think it will be. I would first like to know, who are you professionally? What's your bio professionally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm Heather Lowe. I'm a certified professional recovery coach and a certified professional life coach. I'm the founder of Ditch the Drink, which is, I would say, a health and wellness program. I do one-on-one sober coaching. I have a digital class to help people through early sobriety. I have a membership community for folks that are sober curious. And just a month ago, I launched a Launch Your Coaching Practice. So I also coach coaches. So help coaches who want to start a practice. Since I've seen so much success, I've shared my tricks of the trade, and I've invited my friends and peers in the space to share what they know. Because I partner with the International Association of Professional Recovery Coaches. So I recruit coaches to their program. And then it's a beautiful program that teaches you how to be a really good coach, but often you don't know how to start a business, right? Like now you're ready, but you're like, stores open, where are the clients? So my course is like the next step in how to set up a business and how to get clients. So I've just started with that as well.
That's
yeah, it's huge. You have to know that. But I always say, I have a heart. My heart is social work. My degree actually from college is in social work. So it's what I meant to do. I quickly left social work and went into human resources and sales. I actually sold HR solutions nationally and globally. So I also have a professional human resources certificate, which is why this intersection of recovery and sober curiosity in the workplace is huge for me. I love it. This is my sweet spot. So I also train HR professionals to become certified facilitators of addiction awareness through the International Center for Addiction Recovery Education. So that's a lot of words, but anyways, that's my background. That's who I am.
No, it's so cool, so cool, and I love the work that you're doing, and it's really important work. And I honestly I can't wait to learn more about what you're doing and how you're doing it. I think it's really impressive. So the other question I have for you, because I think we, a lot of us who do public presentations or who submit to do the type of work that you're doing, we kind of send this professional bio, but it only shares so much about us. So I'd also like to know who you are underneath all that, behind all of that. Who are you personally? What drives you, and what got you to this point?
Yeah, what a good question. Well, I was born in a small town, Wisconsin, so that's where I'm from. My parents met in a beer tent, if that tells you anything. I had my first drink at age 12. Drinking beer was like super normalized in my town, in my state. It's the drunkest state out there. So
Mhm.
my parents divorced by the time I was 2. My dad was a bartender. I say he brought his work home with him. So he was, I think, what people would look at like an alcoholic, like a traditional alcoholic, what you think of. He quit drinking by the time I was 5. So I don't recall him as a drinker at all, but he didn't work any sort of program. So it was my mom and I, kind of against the world. She was a young mom. I think we were kind of like the Gilmore Girls, and she
Sure.
remarried. So then I had a blended family. I have a stepdad and a stepsister and a half brother. And my dad remarried, and I had 2 half sisters from him that are 10 and 12 years younger than me. So when anyone asks, like, do you have any siblings? It's like a complicated question. Or what's your birth order? It's like, well, it depends. But I'm definitely firstborn, and I'm the only child of my mom and my dad. So grew up in Wisconsin, went to college in Wisconsin, met my husband in a bar in Wisconsin, and moved to Chicago to start our life. Like I said, I moved from social work to HR pretty quickly, and just always was a drinker. Like I love to party, I love to be social, I love to meet people. I'm extroverted, so definitely get my energy from being out. I drank in like barns and fields in high school, and then in
Okay.
college, of course, with my fake ID, sneaking into the dance clubs and whatnot. When we got to Chicago, we had a little money because we were working now. We were like those young urban professionals. So I was drinking at Cubs games and concerts and dinners, and I switched to like better beer, right? And
Yeah.
maybe hard alcohol. But when I got pregnant with my firstborn, I quit drinking for the pregnancy, of course. And when she was born, I had a little bit of wine in the afternoon. It felt very European. And then again, had a second daughter. So I have 2 daughters who are now 18 and 15. My firstborn just left for college. So uh,
Oh,
that's a
wow.
whole thing that nobody talks
Oh, yeah,
about,
I'm
right? Like
sure.
how this is on the mom when the kid goes. But so yeah, so I drank wine, and it was so normalized, this mommy wine culture. I drank at work, and we'll definitely get into that, I'm sure. But it felt like part of the job at work. And it felt like my husband and I decided that I would work part-time, and he traveled a lot. And that's how we were going to navigate this early parenthood stage of ours.
Hmm.
And I was lonely, and I was bored, and I was drinking at home alone to get through dinner time, bath time, bedtime with the kids. And he was drinking at work, and he was getting sales awards. He was drinking in Vegas. He was having private concerts. He was getting out of the house to go get his social fix, which we were both outgoing social people. And I was getting more and more dependent and more sad drinking home alone.
Mm,
It
right.
still all looked pretty normal, and I'm like highly responsible, didn't drink and drive, wasn't drinking like before school activities or anything like that. But after the kids went to bed, I would just keep pouring, waking up and feeling miserable every day. So that sort of
Sure.
escalated until I took a full-time job when my little one went to kindergarten. And I thought this would be the time I can get back into my career. This is perfect timing. My dad died during that interview process, and I forced myself to take that job, even though it didn't feel right, because I didn't want to use my dad's death as an excuse to hold me back. I did
Mm.
his eulogy. I did 2 more eulogies in the next 2 years of friends that were my age that passed away, leaving families behind. And so it was this grief. It was me not a fit in my job, plus this grief, compounded grief, like 3 times in a row. And me doing the eulogies for all of those people, I felt like I didn't want to feel anything. I wanted to do a really good eulogy and keep it together, standing up front for their people. And I did. I performed really beautiful eulogies. And then when the services were over, I told myself to get over it, right? Like it was done. So I
Okay.
didn't
Yeah.
let myself feel that pain. I just told myself to get over it. And so that's where my drinking kind of switched from normal-ish to self-medication for the
Mhm.
sadness and the grief. So my drinking continued. It was getting worse and worse. I actually in a panic, went to a therapist to talk about it. She said I did not have a drinking problem. I had anxiety problems. She put me on anxiety meds and said I could keep drinking. This was music to my ears. I
Of
continued
course.
drinking. Well, the meds and the alcohol didn't mix. So this became apparent that like all of a sudden there was a few embarrassing moments and blackouts, and I wasn't managing my drinking right, and drink too much and drink too much in front of my kids. And so for 3 years, I did these on off drinking experiments to try to keep alcohol in my life. Like if I could quit drinking, then I didn't actually have to quit drinking, right?
Right.
And so for 3 years doing that, eventually on February 20th of 2018, I ditched the drink for good. And I mean, it started sad, I think, probably that I had to let it go, but sobriety has been the most beautiful surprise of my entire life. It has led me to
Mm.
such an awakened life. And within that, I was job searching again. I had switched jobs. I did the good 2 year try, like 3 times in a row, the same jobs. None of them were right for me. I was often the top salesperson, so I could do the job, but it wasn't singing my soul. And when I
Right.
quit
You didn't feel
drinking,
fulfilled.
no, I couldn't go back to that, and I knew it, and I was about to get offers for these same jobs, and I said to my husband, "I can't do this anymore. I wanna do something else. I wanna teach people how to quit drinking." People like me, highly professional women, mostly, who maybe AA and rehab are not the only answers for them or might not be the right
Mhm.
answers for them, that there's another way, and so I put together everything that I did in my first year of sobriety and everything that I learned into a class called Ditch the Drink Jumpstart. And it's still there. And so I keep thinking about updating it. But to be honest, I was so close to early sobriety then. I have to keep it like that, right? Like as we
Yeah.
talked about, like I've grown since then and it's not the same. It's super sweet that I was right there in the trenches with people, holding
Yeah.
their hand. I was just a little baby 1 year sober, right? But I really wanted to do this. So he's like, my husband's like, "Do you think you can make this much money at it?" It's like, I have no idea. I've never done this before. But anyways, I did. And from there I got trained as a coach and I got one-on-one clients and it's all grown.
Wow.
So
No, I mean, I love the point that you make. And first of all, thank you for all that vulnerability and giving us some insight into the story. And I have so many comments. But I love that you talk about keeping that original story and not updating it because it is so important, especially as professionals in the field discussing addiction or helping people through addiction, the addiction process towards recovery. We have to keep it green and we have to remember what it was like early on. And as we grow and evolve as people in recovery, we almost lose sight at times of what it was like early on, what we did early on, because now, as we've gone on and it's been longer and longer, it just seems more obvious to us what we should have done because our life is so different these days. But when you're struggling with it and you're dealing with these battles, there is no obvious decision. You don't know what to do and you feel very lost and hopeless. And it's those first steps that you take with support of other people that really make the difference in our lives and start to provide that clarity that we need to begin the
mhm,
journey of recovery.
totally. And
But
I
yeah,
have some like before and after pictures, and they're significant. They look like weight loss before and after pictures, but there has been no weight loss, just to be clear. For my husband, like basically quit drinking alongside me, and he had a lot of weight loss. I did not. I was like, wait, I had that drinking problem, but
oh
a
my gosh.
lot of bloat and puff is gone. But I always say thank you to that girl in the before picture. She was the one that did this. She was the one that took those wobbly first steps out It's not like I was bad before and I'm good
Mhm.
now. I was good before. The thing about sobriety is you have to believe in yourself before anyone else does. You have to believe in yourself before you have anything to prove it. You have to have this
Yeah.
relentless, you know, faith that you will do it before there's any progress, before you've seen anything yet. And that's kind of what gets you on that path. So, and I didn't
You
tell
said
anybody about my sobriety in the whole first year, to be clear.
oh,
Now
wow.
I'm like, yeah, yeah, I was very, my inner circle, that's it. I didn't tell anyone. And at year one, probably shortly after I met you, I did like a very casual Facebook post. And then coming out on LinkedIn felt like the biggest deal in the world to me.
I'm sure you received so much support though, because so many people also do the same thing, kind of. They're going through this personal journey, but they're afraid to speak about it because they don't know what the reaction is going to be. And typically, what I've seen is it's been overwhelmingly positive. People end up saying like, "Oh,
Yeah,
I had the same issue. Thank you for talking about it. I feel much better now that I'm not alone." And it's important to have those conversations.
it's
I
exactly
love
right.
part of your story really speaks to culture and what you described, and you even harped on it at some point, is that everything seemed normal. Everything's pretty normal up until now. And you talked about, we talk about drinking in high school, we talk about drinking in college, we talk about getting our first job and being able to afford better alcohol, drinking at ball games, drinking at work events, drinking after work. And none of that seems problematic. None of that seems um, that doesn't describe somebody who what everybody imagines is a problem with alcohol, and oftentimes it isn't somebody. It's just part of our culture, and it's part of what we're used to experiencing as a culture. Alcohol is ingrained in almost everything that we do, but it just takes that little bit of life happening to us where suddenly we cross the line from just a regular cultural drinker to somebody who's a problem drinker and that
Mhm,
can't stop. And you talked about the eulogies, and even then I can imagine people drinking. It's
mhm,
normalized at funerals. It's normalized everywhere we go where there's usually a drink involved to take the nerves off, to not feel
mhm,
our emotions that we're struggling with. And
mhm.
I loved though that you acknowledged a lot of that as normal. And it makes me wonder then how many people are living that same lifestyle and then stepping over that one step too far and don't know what to do about it. Because it is so
Mhm.
normalized, and then it becomes a internal battle of, well, everybody else is drinking, so this isn't a problem, or maybe this is a problem. I'm drinking too much at home, but am I really? Because I'm functioning at work and everybody else is drinking, and so it's really a delicate, tough balance.
Totally. I love what you said about something happens and then that crosses the line.
Mhm.
Because if we knew where the line was and what it was, we would be careful not to cross it, right?
Right.
And we view people as being normal drinkers or having a problem with drinking. And the truth
Hmm.
is, it's neither of those things. There's this whole spectrum, and it's a
Yep.
relationship with alcohol. And anybody who's ever had one sip has some sort of relationship with alcohol. And that's from one sip and never again to dead from alcohol, right? So, and
Hmm.
there's all of this gray in between, and it can change over time, right? And like, I
Right.
don't use the word alcoholic. I actually don't even use the word recovery. I'll call it discovery. But like,
Nice.
alcohol is the thing that gives you a label when you quit. Like, I was a normal, I'll put this in quotes, normal drinker until I quit drinking. And when I quit drinking, well, then I was an alcoholic. That doesn't even make sense, right? Like, now
Mm.
you're going to give me a label for not consuming a, a substance that's a drug. It has the chemical
Yeah.
properties of a drug, and we call it drugs and alcohol. But the truth is, alcohol is a drug, right? And then
Yeah.
we're giving labels to people when they quit, and to each their own about labels. If it helps you, use it. If it hurts you, don't. Doesn't It doesn't matter. You get to describe yourself however you want.
Right.
So there's no shade to that word if it works for you, but it's not the only word. And it's not you're alcoholic or you're not. It's that you have a relationship with alcohol. You're having this experience with alcohol, and it can change over time.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, even the disease model of an alcohol use disorder recognizes it as a spectrum, right? And you could start at the very tip of that, where it's the mild. They consider the mild category, where it's just a relationship with alcohol that where maybe you're drinking at social events and maybe you drink a little bit too much at times. But as it develops on, you start to develop more and more symptoms that you're experiencing as a result of the relationship you have with alcohol. And then that's sort of how you judge where you're at or when it's become a problem. When is enough of those consequences a problem for you? And even a problem is sort of discretionary. It's up to you to decide when is enough, and when you don't have to hit that bottom. That's one part that I hate about the culture is everybody talks about having to hit rock bottom. And the truth is that that rock bottom it's completely up to you when you decide that you've hit that rock bottom. When have you had enough consequences or discomfort as a result of your drinking that you've decided that you want to explore leaving that toxic relationship?
Totally. That prevented me from addressing this for a really long time, to be honestly, because I'm a very high achiever. I'm a perfectionist. I would say I'm a recovering perfectionist now too. I didn't want anything to be wrong with me. I didn't want to admit anything was wrong with me or that I couldn't handle anything because I had it, right? I should mention my first week on that first job with my dad that had just passed away, I broke my leg. I slipped on the ice and broke my leg. The next morning, I swept the floor before I went to the ER to say, something must really be wrong. Like, I want to avoid having anything wrong with me at any time. So then I was dragging myself in the winter, in the snow, on public transportation, down to a new job that wasn't right for me with a broken heart from my dad and literally a broken leg. It was like a very dark time in my life, and drinking was escalating. But I didn't want to address it because I didn't want anything to be wrong with me. And there was no lawyer involved. There was no doctor. I didn't have a diagnosis from a doctor telling me to stop. I didn't have a police person involved to tell me that I was in trouble. I didn't have any of those devastating rock bottom sort of stories. So that's why it's a little bit confusing. And in fact, my neighbors would say, I've never even seen you drunk. And I was like, good. That was always the goal. I was trying to hide it. I wasn't proud of this. I was full of shame. But looking back, I had early childhood trauma. I had it in my genetics. I had it in my environment and my culture. Looking back, I don't feel the same shame because I think, of course I went to alcohol. Of course I did. Like, I had the recipe to have an issue with alcohol. I clicked every single one of those boxes. So it was a solution for me before it was a problem. I have a very loud inner critic, and it hushed that a little bit. It hushed that loud voice that said, you're not good enough all the damn time. Right.
Yep.
So it was meant to be a solution. It was very normalized. I clicked every box that said, you are likely to have, just even from your early childhood, you are likely to have a problem with alcohol. I tried it. I loved it on first sip. It was fun. It gave me the courage to talk to boys. I loved going out. Like I said, I loved being a party girl. It was part of my identity. And then not being like a high functioning drinker, let's say, it didn't have that obvious warning sign to quit. But now I was waking up miserable every day, hating myself. And to me, it's like, does it have to get worse than that? I don't think it could get worse than that. Like, I was waking up full of shame every single day, dragging myself through the day. The best point of the day would be the uptick I would get when I knew I was going to be drinking again.
Yeah, no, it's relatable to a lot of people who've been there before. And if you haven't been there before, I think it's really insightful. It provides some much needed understanding around a person's relationship with alcohol. And Sebastian commented here, words do matter. And I understand when you say you don't use the word recovery. I have learned at the end of the day, it is any word that helps us find our strength is the right word for us. Congratulations for finding your power word. And I love that, because it brings in the inclusive nature of every decision that we make in our lives, and the understanding that each one of us is different, and what motivates us could be something totally different than what motivates another person. And we need to have the wherewithal to understand that we have to find what works for us, and that just like arriving to a place where we've developed this poor relationship with alcohol, the moving away from that poor relationship is also a personal journey. Both sides are personal, and we have to figure out what works best for us and what words mean the most to us, and then embrace it, and then not judge others for having a difference of opinions or a different approach to finding recovery, or however you'd like to call it.
Exactly. And the ways to recover, it's a patchwork of many options, and nobody's looks the same. We all get to put together our own things that work. But I love that Sebastian said that. Thank you. And let's talk about that for a minute, because let's talk about language. First of all, Shatterproof is a wonderful resource they have an article about language in recovery. So that's great. And when we talk about the workplace, I'll tell you, I did a poll. I have like a little over 10,000 Instagram followers. And I did a poll about what they want people in the workplace to know, what my followers would want people in the workplace to know. And you know what they like overwhelmingly came back with? Language. Language. And the language they don't want to hear in the workplace is like, it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yep.
This might be wine in their coffee cup, like time for a drink. We should be drinking. Like that sort of language, which I'll be honest, I use that. I love to do that. Alcohol is the cheapest, easiest, funniest thing to throw out there to connect with people. I did it all the time as a drinker.
Yep.
As a sober person, when you hear that, you cringe, because it immediately feels like you don't belong. It immediately feels like you're excluded from that fun. And as a sober person, I still love to party. I still want to belong. I still want a sense of community. I still want to be invited, right? But it's 5 o'clock somewhere kind of language, or this might be wine, or we got to get a drink after this, automatically makes me feel like not me, like excluded. So I think language is important, and a workplace tip is to consider that type of language that might be excluding people. And a third of the population doesn't drink for any reason. Recovery is one reason, but also it could be health or religion or cultural taboo or medication or a certain stage of motherhood, or any sorts of personal choice, right? Any sorts of reasons. So if you're using that language, you're leaving out a third of the people in the workplace that feel like they're not included in that.
I completely agree. And this is one of those areas that I think for most people who want to be helpful, even whether you've had the issue or not, or know someone who's had an issue with this or not, or I think the way that we are helpful as a community and as a society is just changing the words that we use. And every time I've ever done presentations about substance use disorders at work, the point that I leave and the emphasis I put on, if you want to help with this, start changing the words that you use, and start just becoming more cognizant that just because you find something funny, or that you've been using a certain word for most of your life, it doesn't make it okay, or doesn't make it right for other people. And there could not be a stronger case for wanting to change the words that we use when we talk about this stuff. And you know what? And 100%, I'll be honest, is even as a person who's got almost 11 years away from drinking, I've even used as a joke. Thank you. I've even used as a joke, like, oh my God, I need a drink. Like it's become so ingrained in our culture. And it's those things that I say it without even realizing what I'm saying, or just trying to be funny and not really even thinking about the impact it has on others. And it's those learning moments that we have of saying, you know what, I probably shouldn't say that, just in case this person is struggling, or I don't know them well enough to know what's going on. So this brings me on to the topic that, no, please,
I was just going to mention, you said, if you want to be helpful. And I was thinking, everybody is in recovery or knows somebody that's in recovery or struggling. It is so prevalent. All of us, it's us or somebody we know, I think. So because of the amount of people that it affects. So That's everyone. That's all of us. So make it safe for all of us. And yeah, that language is so important.
I still get upset. I mean, even at the base level, like, of course, I feel like this, I would consider this advanced language changing. Just at the base level of changing the terms that we use to describe somebody who is struggling or has struggled, we got to start there. Let's stop saying
Mhm,
stuff like addict and alcoholic.
mhm,
Again, if you
mhm.
identify with that personally within a certain program, I think there's meaning behind that, and there's good reason for that. But to assume that
Mhm,
everybody's going to be comfortable with identifying that way, and I always talk about that I'm part of a program that uses terms like that. I was not comfortable with that term until I was comfortable with that term. It took me a while to
mhm,
get there, and that
mhm.
actually was a factor in deterring me from seeking help because I thought I had to say that I had to attach this label onto myself. And then for quite
Right.
some time, even afterwards, once I found my version of recovery, I felt like I had to wear that label everywhere I went, and like it was like
Mhm,
the scarlet letter in a sense that okay, well now that I've admitted I'm an alcoholic, I have to tell everybody I'm
mhm.
an alcoholic. I have to wear this badge, and I don't know if it
Yeah,
was like I'm going to keep shaming myself in order to
yeah,
keep myself sober, but for
right.
whatever reason, I felt like I had to embrace this as part of my identity when it's just one aspect of a part of who I am.
Right, and the problem with that is it blames you as a person versus the
Mhm.
substance. It's saying there's
Right.
something wrong with you. It can be looked at like that, and there's nothing wrong with you.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong with you. Um if you were drinking too much, let's say, alcohol's doing its job. Alcohol is a substance that creates dependence, so it's doing exactly what it's meant to do. You and your body are reacting exactly like your body should react. You should be having hangovers. You should be getting bloated, trying to hold hydration. Your anxiety is spiking. Your mental health is going down. That's what alcohol does to you. So if you consume that in those quantities, that's going to happen to you. There's nothing wrong with you. And I would guess you, me, everyone originally went to our drug or our alcohol as a solution, right? As a solution to pain or to escape
Mhm.
pain, because who wants to feel that? So
Yeah,
the
no, I
labels is like saying shame on you as a person versus this is an addictive substance. It's a class one carcinogen. It affects all seven systems of the body. If you're over consuming that, you're going to have these results. And
right,
there's nothing wrong with you. There's something wrong with
right, no,
that
exactly.
substance.
Right, well, and it also makes it seems farther away or almost impossible. Like, we talk about one day at a time a lot when it comes to recovery, but then you also talk about labeling yourself forever as a problem.
Hmm.
And it's an
Hmm.
interesting dichotomy there. I always think about the words we use in terms of like let's compare it to other issues. If I'm struggling with my weight, I'm not going to walk around and say I'm a fat.
Hmm.
And that's harsh, and I understand the implications of what I'm saying, but it's related to what we're talking about here. It's saying I'm the problem. And then attaching like a dark name to it that is a
Hmm.
shame-based name. Or if I'm depressed, I'm a
Hmm.
depressed. Or if I've been domestically abused, I'm a weak person. It's like walking around
Hmm.
making a claim based on the issues that we've struggled with. And it's
Your
not
hardest
necessarily the
struggle.
right
Yeah.
approach. Right,
Hmm.
right. I'm
And
defined by my
something you
hardest
have
struggles.
overcome and I have overcome. And I'm still
Mhm.
gonna walk around in my about my showing my darkest moment like that. I've overcome that. So it's the
Yeah.
rising to, instead of staying in the dark hole. We've all been in a dark hole in one way or another.
Mhm.
And yeah, our whole identity isn't the dark hole. We've taken the steps to get out. So
Oh my God, I love
definitely
what you're
important.
saying. And I think I knew this maybe somewhere deep down, but I love what you're saying, where it's like I'd rather be defined by my overcoming of this issue and who I am, and defined by the fight that I put in to be stronger in my life and to develop
Hmm.
healthier coping mechanisms than be defined by the struggle. that
Yeah.
I went through, the problem that I went through.
Yeah.
Okay, so
It's
we can
like
talk about
robbing a
this
house you
forever.
don't live
Right.
Yeah.
But I do want to talk about this idea of alcohol and workplaces and some of the dynamics. Um, Sharing a personal experience that I had, I think was in 2018 or 2019. I gave my first presentation to a tech company in New York, somewhere in the city, about substance use disorders at work. And during the presentation, I kept seeing people's eyes kind of glancing over to the right as I'm doing this presentation. It's to my left, to their right. And eventually, as I'm talking about culture in the workplace, I and kind of embracing this idea and this culture, um, I look over to my left and realize there's a full bar that's right next to me. And I'm like, interesting. And I don't say anything because I don't want to shame anybody or shame the leaders there. That wasn't my intention. And then I ended up going there to the same workplace. That was a Thursday, going to the same workplace on Friday to go hang out with somebody I knew who worked there. And it's Friday at 5, and they're walking around with a giant ice luge and they're having people take shots. It's 5 o'clock. We made it through the week. And they're having people take shots. And I'm just thinking, we just had this impactful talk yesterday where everybody opened up to me and shared about their concerns and their worries and how uncomfortable it makes them. Yet you've ordered an ice luge to the office, and we're now taking
Mhm.
shots in the workplace. Uh, so it's an interesting dynamic that I think people have embraced. It's sort of an old school belief. We see it in TV all the time of people kind of pulling out the bottle of scotch and having a sip at their desk, but it doesn't really match up with modern times or modern need. Probably didn't match then either, but people didn't speak up as much then. So I want to start by asking you, you talked about going in to train HR professionals. Can you
Mhm.
speak a little bit about that to me? And what are you training HR professionals to do?
What I like to do is walk so the HR professionals that are signing up for this training are interested in it and they're all
Mhm.
for it, of course. So I wish I could
Right.
get the people that would roll their eyes at it also.
Right, right, right.
Right? So I already have a very engaged audience because they've chosen to sign up for this training
Sure.
because they want to help, they want to learn, they have a heart and an awareness of that. So I've got like the best adult people to teach. I like to walk them through the employee life cycle and what that looks like at their organization and where they can improve to make it a more sober curious environment, a more recovery friendly environment, whatever kind of a safer place for people
Mm.
to explore their relationship with alcohol. So for
Yeah.
starters, I was a recruiter. I was a director of recruitment for a long time. And in my process, we often in the interview process go to lunch and have drinks, right? Get to
Mhm.
know someone, get to know them, get them a little loose maybe with drinks, and then you really get to know them. Or if they're a high level candidate, pay for expensive drinks. That's a great way to get them to fall in love with you and go for it. So it starts even before an offer letter. Alcohol is sometimes part of that process. And then looking at the employee handbook. I know I had handbooks that would say no alcohol in the workplace, right? Well, there was
Mhm.
bottles of wine on every desk
Yeah.
because they were corporate gifts. There was a beer
Right.
cart that came around on Fridays. There
Mhm.
was all you can drink happy hours or whatever it was, but the the handbook says absolutely no alcohol in the workplace. We're a no alcohol drug sort of workplace. And then your supervisor is handing you a bottle of wine. So there's a big
Right.
disconnect there. So the handbook,
Yep.
the policies, that could be something to look at. And then again, if somebody's struggling, I also had like President's Club of being in sales, President's Club type vacations, all you can
Mhm.
drink paid vacations. And there was
Right.
plenty of embarrassing things that happened, as you can imagine. Christmas parties. I mean, the horror stories, right? The people taking their clothes off in front of the whole company, that whole thing. It wasn't me. I'm happy to say none of that was me. I knew better than to just go home
Right.
and do my drinking, like keep it in check at my work event and then go home and actually do my drinking. But
Sure.
But there was all of that. And then the problem isn't that we're serving all this alcohol. Again, it's on the person that overdid it and then did something embarrassing. Shame on them. I mean, I can't imagine showing up to work on Monday or after that trip and being that person. But
Oh,
you know, turning it into a joke or whatever that looks like. But really, that's painful. That's painful for everybody. And then the truth about alcohol is like the sexual harassment, accidents, attendance, like the negative consequences of alcohol in the workplace are plenty. There are so many. But just like you're saying about that company that you presented to, there's a huge disconnect of what we think alcohol does versus what it actually does. And what it actually
right.
does is all those devastating things that I just mentioned. What we think it does is bond people,
Hmm.
which it doesn't. We think it does
Right.
because we're all doing the same activity together, or we shared something we wouldn't normally share that we're later going to be embarrassed about or regret, perhaps, or it's going to
Right.
push people away from us. We think it bonds. It doesn't. We think it connects us. It doesn't. It gets us further apart. It's actually dangerous. We think it helps with sales. We think it helps relax us. We think it does all these things, but the truth is it really doesn't do those things. So I think just building awareness on that disconnect of what it really does and what the actual effects are from alcohol in the workplace, and then walking through the employee cycle. And what would it be like if you were me or you walking through that employee cycle? I mean, I have clients who get a lot of sober success and then they have a work event and it terrifies them. They pour a glass of wine and put it in front of their face at dinner and don't drink it because they don't want anyone to know that they're not drinking. They're so embarrassed
Right.
and ashamed of not drinking. And I can't think of any other drug that you'd be working so hard to quit that then you would put it right in front of your face and expect yourself not to do it, right? Like if that was cocaine or heroin or something else, which by the way, alcohol is the third preventable cause of death in the United States. It's not,
Yep.
alcohol has more harm than all those other drugs combined. It just gets different press.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
it's just that disconnect about what we think alcohol is versus what it really is. And then the language, the policies, the way we celebrate, the way we gift, the way we reward in the workplace, and looking at how alcohol is a part of that.
I love this. I think that you're making so many different great points, and a couple of the words that stood out to me was, one was safety, and to me, that's what this is really about. It's creating a safe environment, not just safe in terms of physical incidences or workplace. What do they call it? Like workers' comp, like issues. Um,
Right.
but it's also about psychological safety and feeling safe to stand up for who you are and feel safe that you're not going to be tempted or pushed into to have to join some type of social event at work because alcohol's involved. It's really about safety and feeling like a sense of belonging. And we talked last week about with another guest that I had, about diversity, equity, and inclusion. What does it mean to be an inclusive workplace? And so often, one of the points that was made was that so often we think about that just in terms of like the big three, race, sexual orientation, or gender, and we don't think about it in terms of alcohol. But part of an inclusive workplace means that we're creating a safe environment for people who've struggled with alcohol use disorder or substance use disorder, and making them feel like they can be a part of the team and bond with the team without needing to have alcohol involved. And I mean, for all the other reasons you mentioned as well, it's wildly inappropriate, yet it seems to be the go-to, I would say, instant gratification concept of, I'm going to use alcohol to bond people because it's easier than having all of us have to do a team building exercise together. And really what it's trying to do is avoid upfront uncomfortability, I'd imagine, because team
Mm-hmm.
building events and personal growth is typically uncomfortable. And so instead,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to put alcohol in your system. That'll bond you and you'll be uncomfortable later on the tail end of it. But we'll
Totally.
push
Open
that. We'll
bar is
worry about that
easy, right?
later. Yeah, we'll worry about
Mm-hmm.
that later. When you talk about recovery friendly, and I want you to make this point, I'm aware of what it means, but I would love to hear from you what a recovery friendly workplace is. What does that mean when that's talked about? Because it's coming up more and more.
Yeah, there's a lot of different terms in the workplace, and I don't have the exact definition, and I think there are differences. So that's definitely for somebody to
Sure.
research. But I would say, just looking through the eyes of somebody who maybe has struggled with alcohol. How does your place look to that person? And if you
Mhm.
can lead with that perspective, with those glasses on, you'll start to see some changes that can be made. And you'll see why at the end of that meeting that that comment about we can all go drink now is inappropriate. And in fact, I've had people that have lost their jobs because they have been in recovery and haven't joined in on only drinking activities. And like you said, that's leaving somebody out. That's not inclusive at all. And a lot of people are living in recovery or not drinking for any reason, like we talked about. So it's
Sure.
also a hit to the bottom line for companies to not recognize that. I would say it's really easy to be recovery friendly and you can offer options. It's super easy. I'm not even saying ditch. I mean, obviously, I'm saying ditch the drink, but if you don't want to ditch the drink completely in your workplace, okay, that's cool. You can provide an alcohol free option. That is so easy to do. So there's a drink for everyone. And if you have a
Yeah.
signature drink at an event, you can have it with or without alcohol, and then nobody has to stand out. Everybody can enjoy a sophisticated sip and a toast and a celebration of something, and they don't have to have alcohol in their glass. That's a super easy thing to do. And there are so many options these days. You can have an alcohol free beer, right? Somebody can also have a beer and at the bar with you, and it doesn't have to include alcohol. So the
Right.
ritual of drinking is there, but the drink is change the drink. You can keep the ritual or the idea of bonding, but give options for what drink to have. I would also say drinking shouldn't be the activity. You
Hmm.
could do it, there's plenty of other activities to do, and you might be serving alcohol and non-alcoholic drinks alongside. But if drinking is the main activity, that leaves a lot of people out because it's easy to, if you're playing a game or doing a puzzle or an escape room or something like that, there's a place for everyone to jump in and participate, a ropes
Hmm.
course, whatever kind of team building thing you do. And if the activity is just drinking, the person that doesn't drink can't participate.
I love this, and I'm actually thinking. So in this program that I'm in right now for school, we're sort of constantly challenged to always be on the lookout for opportunities for research. And I just thought about it'd be really interesting to do a study in workplaces of taking a place that focuses on drinking, for example, and with their goal, I'm sure their goal in mind is to improve collaboration. They want to increase bonding. They want people to feel like they're part of the organization, productivity, ultimately, in the end. I would love to do a study on that about drinking and then on alternatives and to show them. I would guess my hypothesis would be that the drinking activity probably would score the lowest in terms of team building, productivity, motivation, attachment to the workplace and to the workplace beliefs. I would imagine that it would probably score pretty low compared to a lot of other activities that could be done to
Mhm,
improve those types of things.
mhm. Totally. And you make such a good point. So first of all, I think like any networking situation, any networking situation or party or gathering or whatever it is, I think the first 15 minutes are a little uncomfortable for everyone, everywhere, no
Yeah,
matter what.
for
Maybe
sure.
you don't know anyone, they're just acquaintances, you're getting your bearings. Where's the bathroom? What's the schedule? Who are these people? What's the energy here? What can I expect? You're just kind of trying to figure it out. A lot of us jump to the bar to have a drink to escape that discomfort in the beginning, like you said. And now I don't. It is uncomfortable and I just sit through it and I say hi to
Yeah,
one person and within 15 minutes, everything's fine, right? I start to get the vibe. If I drink too much, if you can imagine the next day, we're hiding our head. We're calling in sick. We're not showing up. Or we're
right.
hanging our head. We're not going to talk to that person we over talked to last night. right? We're
Yeah.
we're disconnecting from them. So like you said, a little discomfort in the beginning to be like, okay, this is kind of awkward, no big deal. I can just like go to the bathroom, set my coat down, go to the food table, whatever I got to
Yeah.
do, and then say hello to another person standing by themselves. It's a little uncomfortable, but the discomfort that comes from over drinking afterwards is way worse. And it takes you away from your colleagues because you don't want to talk to them because you're embarrassed, right?
It's
Or
really
they
about
were
the
embarrassed.
concept. Right. Right. They were embarrassed. It's interesting, and it's sort of embracing the concept of being uncomfortable. And for
Mhm.
somehow, as a society and a culture, we've gotten away from being uncomfortable, or that we have to blow off steam by using alcohol. We need to, anytime we're feeling stressed or uncomfortable, that has to be buried using an outside substance. It has to go away immediately. And the truth is
Totally.
that most of our growth and the benefit that we would have to ourselves is by working through that uncomfortability, embracing the uncomfortability. There's nothing wrong with being uncomfortable. It's not a good or bad thing. It's just part of life. So
Exactly
being
what I
able
tell
to
my
embrace
clients
that.
too. We're so
Yeah.
quick to jump ship on ourselves. Or they feel they're like, oh, but I felt uncomfortable. I say, sounds like that was a perfectly appropriate way to feel in that moment,
Yeah.
right? It is uncomfortable to walk into a room of strangers and expect yourself to sell or whatever it is you're supposed to do, make a good impression or perform in some way.
Mm.
Feeling uncomfortable is perfectly appropriate and you don't have to pour alcohol on it and just jump ship on yourself because of it.
No, no, you make such a great point. And going back to the inclusivity concept, I think you presented some really good options of what leaders and organizations can do. You don't have to, it doesn't mean you necessarily, if you don't want to, change your entire culture, but it does mean adding to the culture or adding to these events to be more inclusive towards people who don't drink, whether they're in recovery or not, whatever it is. If they don't drink, I think what ends up happening in a lot of people when they think about inclusivity is that their mind immediately goes to, I have to think about every single person's individual needs. And to an extent, that yes, that is true. We do have to consider all backgrounds, and uh, all the different personalities and struggles that people have had, or ways that people may see it. But it doesn't mean having to overcomplicate every event. It's a simple solution that you presented of just adding some mocktails to it, or adding maybe some alternative events that could be team building. But it's just a simple solution when you're thinking of inclusivity in terms of an alcohol, in terms of alcohol, of just adding those little options for other people to feel comfortable as well. It's just really
Just
thinking about others and removing. Just ask. I love that. Just ask. Just ask what other people want. Um, it's trying to understand that not everybody is you. So just because you're planning an event, you don't just want to plan an event that it's all about what you like. We do need to, especially in workplaces, if we want them to be inclusive, think about what other people's needs may be as well and anticipate those. That's
totally, and
inclusivity.
give options and they can make choices for themselves. And I will say, somebody might not be drinking for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Somebody might not be drinking that day, just that day, because they're on a medication or they're getting up for a run in the morning. Or maybe they're working with me on the side and they're doing a sober experiment like I was doing, right? Maybe
Mm,
they're not drinking for 30, maybe they're doing sober October. Highly recommend it, by the way. Sober September, I highly recommend it. Maybe they're taking a break from drinking for a period of time. So maybe that doesn't mean they're never going to drink again, but maybe on this event, in this moment, they want to try a different option. And I think there's a lot of us out there. I think there's a lot of people that are exploring and evaluating their relationship with alcohol, and they're on any place on that spectrum and they're starting to look at it. So why not encourage that? Because it's a really healthy choice. So just like if you had an allergy to gluten, you would want to provide a gluten-free menu for somebody, or if they were vegetarians, you would want to provide a vegetarian menu, provide an alcohol-free menu.
right.
Same thing.
That's a great example. That paints a beautiful picture. You're exactly right. I love that. And I try not to shame anybody, and it's really more about education. But at the risk of potentially making someone feel bad, which I don't mean to do, I think if you're somebody who's planning these events for organizations, just think a little bit harder. Just because the alcohol bonding events that's the low hanging fruit. That's just the easy option that everybody goes to because it just seems like, well, let's just bring in some drinks and let everybody hang out. It seems like the
Mhm.
easiest option. But as you mentioned earlier too, having other types of events or putting together other types of initiatives that don't involve alcohol. Hey, we're putting together a group of people. The New York City Marathon's coming in a couple months. Putting together a group of people to start training together after work every day. Like, who would want to do that? Just thinking of different options that can help bring people together without alcohol having to be involved at all. It's fairly simple. We're putting together a dodgeball team. We're doing this. We're doing
Mhm.
whatever it may be. We're doing a chess club. Any of that can bring
Mhm.
people together and provides people the options of not feeling like they have to drink to belong.
Totally. Totally. I love it. Yeah. And I love your theory and your hypothesis and your research to do that, to say what actually does bond, what actually does relax people, whatever you're going using alcohol for in the workplace, what is the goal of it? And does it actually do that? And a little bit of research, I'm with you, Blake, it will say, I think it doesn't do those things. And if you actually want team bonding, how about with a genuine, authentic, clear eyes and full heart sort of sharing that isn't fogged up by alcohol? That's where some real intimacy can come in, right? Some real closeness with your colleagues by sharing your authentic self, not your self who you are after a few drinks.
Right. Right. And that's where that real connection comes in. And I know a lot of the studies that I've read about those types of bonding and that authentic self coming out, creating a culture that allows for the authentic self to come out within employees is what creates that bond. And that's where the most innovation happens, the most productivity, the most creativity. That's where it all happens at a workplace, is when people can be their authentic selves and not feel like they have to hide their thoughts and who they are.
Right.
So I,
And
I
that's why
loved,
we feel bonded to each other for sharing our vulnerable stories, right? We feel like then we know, like, and trust each other because we've shared an actual piece of ourselves. So that is
mm,
where the real bonding comes. And leaders, if leaders can share, I've struggled with my mental health. I've been exploring my relationship with alcohol. If leaders can set the tone for that, that definitely makes it safe for everybody to share. I've been thinking about cutting back too, or I'm doing sober
mm,
October. Who wants to join me? Things like that.
yeah. So you bring up a interesting point, and I've heard that so many times, and it wasn't until, and I've told this story before on this podcast, but I'm going to be very quick about it. That same presentation I told you about, where the bar was to my left, I mentioned the idea of what you talked about, that it's sort of like the trickle down theory that if a leader can be vulnerable, then everyone else is going to feel comfortable being vulnerable. I made that point, and then someone raised their hand and goes, I'd like to share that when I disappeared 90 days ago for 2 weeks, I wasn't on vacation. I was getting help for a problem I had with cocaine. And today I picked up my 90-day medallion. And everyone applauded. And then all of a sudden, everybody started sharing. And I'm just sitting there like I'm getting chills. I'm like, oh my God, that actually worked. And everybody starts sharing their experiences with substances or with depression, with other mental health concerns. And everyone starts opening up and bonding. And come to find out that that person was the CFO who started that. And it was proof that if the leader, someone at a high up position, can just share something personal, it's going to lead to open up so many doors of growth and connectivity. It was such a cool experience.
Absolutely. I love it. I have goosebumps right now. And that's exactly it. That's all it takes is you to set the stage to talk about that. And yeah, a leader to share, and everybody immediately can open up to. That's real bonding in the workplace.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm so glad we get to catch up here in front of everybody, and I've always been grateful that I've got to meet you, and I get to watch everything that you're doing. It inspires me regularly. So I genuinely appreciate everything you've been doing to talk about this sober curious and sober lifestyle. To me, it's beautiful. So thank you, and I appreciate you
I
joining
love
me for
it.
this conversation.
Thanks for having me. I love to watch your growth. I'm going to continue to watch your growth. You are an absolute dynamo out there, and count me on your team for whatever it is that you're doing, Blake. I appreciate it so much. And if anybody is curious about being, as everyone's sober curious and you're afraid, I was terrified to ditch the drink. I'm just here to tell you it's the best, most awakened life ever. I love it. None of those fears, even the worst things that could happen, it's like I would choose it because it is so, being sober is such a beautiful, aligned life. So I encourage anyone to give it a try.
I love it. And they can find you at ditchthedrink.com, right?
Yeah, ditchthedrink.com, my website. I'm on all social media platforms: LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest. No TikTok. You're welcome for that. But yeah, ditchthedrink.com. I have a free Sober Secrets guide. I have a weekly newsletter. I welcome everyone. Stay in touch. And thanks for having me, Blake.
No, thank you. And happy National Recovery Month, everybody.
Yeah.